When my wife Margaret passed away 3 years ago, the house didn't just fall silent. It felt hollow. Every photograph, every teacup, every letter she left behind felt like a small, glowing ember of memory I could keep warm with. But nothing carried more meaning than her jewelry box. A polished cherry wood case she kept on the dresser for nearly 45 years. Inside lived her wedding ring, her mother's brooch, a gold bracelet I bought her on our 30th anniversary, and a necklace she promised to give our granddaughter one day. Those pieces weren't expensive in the way the world measures value, but to me, they were priceless. So imagine my confusion one Tuesday morning when I went into my bedroom to clean the dresser and found the jewelry box gone. At first I thought I'd misplaced it. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and grief still fogs certain corners of my memory. I looked everywhere, the closet, under the bed, the safe, even the bathroom cabinet. Nothing. My son Michael arrived later that afternoon with his wife Christine and my daughter Emily. They were strangely upbeat, too smiley, too helpful, too something. "Dad, we cleaned a bit upstairs," Emily said. "Hope that's okay." That sentence stabbed deeper than it seemed. My kids hadn't voluntarily cleaned anything in that house for years. "Did any of you move your mother's jewelry box?" I asked. Instant tension. Christine glanced at Michael. Michael scratched the back of his neck. And Emily, always the worst liar of the three, forced a smile so stiff it looked painful. "Oh, that old thing?" she said. "We thought it was just taking up space. We put it away." "Where?" I asked. "In storage," Michael said. Storage, a word with too many meanings. Something in my chest tightened. Margaret never put anything in storage. Everything she kept with intention. "Show me," I said. Michael stepped forward. "Dad, relax. We're just trying to help declutter. Simplify the house a bit." "I didn't ask for decluttering," I said, my voice sharper than I expected. "I asked where the jewelry box is." The three exchanged another one of those looks. That silent group decision-making that parents always notice, even in their adult kids. "We'll bring it back later," Michael finally said. "Don't worry." But I did worry, because they weren't telling me something. 2 days passed. No jewelry box. No explanation. No kids at the door, just avoidance and excuses. So I called Michael myself. "Bring me the box," I said. "Today I'm done waiting." "Dad, we already took care of it," he said. "Took care of it?" I repeated slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means," he sighed, "we sold it." My heart stopped. Even the refrigerator's hum went silent. "You what?" "Dad, the pieces were just collecting dust, and you're not using them. We figured it was better to turn them into something useful." "Useful for who?" I asked, already knowing the answer. There was a pause so long it practically told the truth aloud. "We split it," he finally said. "Between me, Emily, and Christine." My grip tightened around the phone. If I had been 10 years younger, my voice would have exploded through the speaker. But age makes anger quieter, not weaker. "You sold your mother's jewelry without asking me," I said, every syllable trembling. "Every piece?" "Yeah," he said quickly, too quickly. "All of it. Show me the receipts." Another pause. "Dad, come on." "Now." He hung up. The next day, a padded envelope arrived in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single appraisal slip from a local jeweler I'd never visited. The slip listed one item, only one: Margaret's wedding ring. The appraised value was 10 times higher than I ever imagined. And scribbled at the bottom was a handwritten note. "Sir, the other items your family brought in weren't part of the set. Something isn't right. Call me." My blood ran cold. They hadn't just sold the jewelry. They'd kept the most valuable piece, hidden it, lied about it, and something about the rest didn't add up. That was the moment I realized. My kids weren't just greedy. They were hiding a secret so big they were willing to betray their own mother's memory to protect it. When I walked into that jewelry shop the next morning, the bell over the door jingled with a soft metallic ring that reminded me too much of Margaret's laugh. The place smelled faintly of lemon polish and old velvet, an oddly comforting mix. Behind the counter stood a man with silver-framed glasses and the kind of posture that said he'd spent his whole life bent over tiny gears and stones. "You must be Mr. Harrington," he said, recognizing me before I even introduced myself. I nodded. "You left me a note." He motioned me closer, lowering his voice even though we were the only 2 people in the shop. "I wasn't sure you knew what your family was doing, and after meeting them, I had a feeling you didn't." I exhaled slowly. Tell me everything. He pulled out a small tray lined with deep blue felt, and there, right in the center, sat Margaret's wedding ring. The sight of it hit me so hard my knees almost gave out. I reached for the glass case for support. I thought they sold this, I whispered. They tried, he said, but I refused to buy it. My head snapped up. Why? He tapped the loop hanging around his neck. Because this ring wasn't made in 1977 like they claimed, sir. This ring was reset recently. Very recently. I felt a coldness crawl up my spine. Reset. What does that mean? He picked up the ring gently, turning it under the light. See here? The prongs are newer. The band has been polished too clean. Someone replaced the original diamond with a different stone. Someone wanted to hide the provenance. My throat tightened. Why would my kids replace the diamond in their mother's ring? That, he said softly, is what made me suspicious. He reached under the counter and pulled out a second tray. On it sat 3 loose stones. I didn't understand their significance until he spoke the next words. These were brought in separately, by your son. I stared at them. 3 diamonds, each slightly different in color and cut. What are these? I asked. Sir, the jeweler said, his voice gentle and grim. These look like they were removed from older pieces, likely antique, likely sentimental, and definitely valuable. My pulse thudded against my ribs. You're telling me those stones came from Margaret's jewelry? I can't be certain, he said, but the timing fits, and your son's behavior fit even more. I swallowed hard. What do you mean? He leaned back, rubbing his forehead. He was nervous, shaky. Not the kind of man who sells jewelry because he needs extra cash. The kind who sells jewelry because he's covering something up. There it was again. That word, covering. I forced myself to speak through the dryness in my mouth. Did he say anything? Anything at all? The jeweler hesitated. Then he nodded. One thing, he said, my sisters can't know. I froze. Sisters. But Emily was his only sister, and Margaret had no sisters left alive. So who was he talking about? Before I could ask, the jeweler slid a folded paper toward me. This is the full appraisal record. He didn't want you to see it. My hands shook as I opened it. And there it was. A 4th item, a bracelet I had never seen before. Gold, old-fashioned. Not Margaret's style, but listed under the family name. Where did this come from? I whispered. The jeweler gave me a sad half-smile. That's what you need to find out. I left the shop holding a bag that felt heavier than bricks. Not because of weight, but because of everything it represented. My kids hadn't just betrayed me. They hadn't just stolen from their mother. They were tangled in something deeper, something they never wanted me to discover. And as I drove home, the quiet hum of the engine couldn't drown out the only thought echoing through my mind. There was another woman in my wife's story, and my children had been hiding her from me for years. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the soft ticking of the clock, sounds that used to soothe me but now only sharpened the ache in my chest. That bracelet from the appraisal sheet lay in front of me like a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Who was the woman it belonged to? And why did my children know about her when I didn't? The house felt different now, heavy, watching me. Like Margaret herself was somewhere in the corners, waiting for me to put the pieces together. I kept picturing her hands, soft, small, always cold no matter how warm the room was. Those hands only ever wore simple jewelry. Nothing as ornate or old-fashioned as the bracelet. So where had it come from? By sunrise, I made my decision. I called Emily first. She answered on the 3rd ring with a voice too bright for morning. Dad, you okay? Need you and your brother here, I said. Now. She went silent. Then she said, Is this about the jewelry? Just get here. An hour later, the 3 of them stood in my living room. Michael with his arms crossed like a scolded teenager. Emily wringing her hands. Christine pretending to look sympathetic but keeping her distance, as if guilt were contagious. I didn't waste time. Tell me who this belongs to. I slid the printed photo of the appraisal across the coffee table. Michael's face drained of color. Emily sucked in a sharp breath. Christine stared at it like it was a ghost crawling out of the paper. Where did you get that? Michael asked. The jeweler. I leaned back, feeling my pulse pounding in my throat. Now answer me. No one spoke. The air grew thick. I could smell the faint trace of Christine's perfume, too floral for morning. Michael's foot tapped nervously against the rug. Emily bit her lip. Finally, Emily broke. "Dad, we were trying to protect you." "By stealing from me? By lying? By selling your mother's things behind my back?" Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't supposed to go like this. Michael shot her a warning look. She ignored it. "That bracelet wasn't Mom's," she whispered. "It belonged to—" Michael cut in. "Emily, don't." But it was too late. "It belonged to your other daughter." I didn't understand the sentence. It hit my ears, but not my brain. "My what?" I asked quietly. Emily pressed her hands to her face. "Dad, you had another daughter. Before us. Before you married Mom." My mouth went dry. My body felt like it had turned to stone. "That's impossible," I said. "I would know." But even as I said it, something inside me shifted. Old memories flickered. Nothing clear, just emotional shadows. A sense of a life lived too quickly in my 20s, full of travel and mistakes and nights I barely remembered. Christine stepped in, her voice soft but trembling. She reached out to Michael first. "After Mom passed, she wanted to meet you. She sent that bracelet as proof." I stared at the photo, gold, old-fashioned, something a young woman might keep as a symbol, a link to someone she never knew. Emily sat beside me, her knee brushing mine. "Dad," she said, her mother told her the truth on her deathbed, that the man she grew up with wasn't her biological father. I could barely breathe. "Why didn't any of you tell me?" Michael swallowed hard. "Because you were grieving Mom. You were barely eating, barely talking. We didn't want to drop something like that on you." "That's not your choice," I said, my voice cracking. "That's my life." Michael paced, running both hands through his hair. "We were going to tell you eventually, but then she asked for money. Not a lot, but enough that we started getting suspicious." Emily shook her head. "We didn't know if she was real or just some scammer." "So you sold your mother's jewelry?" I asked, incredulous. Michael's voice lowered. "We thought if she was lying, we'd catch her when she came back asking for more. And if she was telling the truth, we could use the money to get a DNA test done discreetly." The room spun for a moment. I gripped the armrest. "So which is it?" I asked. "Was she lying?" Michael didn't answer. Christine looked away. Emily wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Where is she now?" I whispered. Michael exhaled, defeated. She disappeared, changed her number, stopped responding to everything. My heart sank. "And the jewelry?" He looked like a boy again, scared, ashamed. We panicked. When the bracelet came back from the appraisal and we saw how old it was, how expensive, it made everything feel too real. We didn't know what to do, so we split it up and sold it to cover our tracks. Tracks. That word burned almost as much as betrayal. They weren't trying to protect me. They were trying to protect themselves from the consequences of hiding something they should have told me the moment it happened. I stood with effort, feeling the weight of all my years pressing on me. "All of you, out." "Dad!" Emily stepped forward. "Out," I repeated. "We'll talk when I've had time to think." Michael opened his mouth to argue, but one look from me shut him down. They left slowly, like people leaving a funeral, but not their first. When the door finally closed and the house fell silent again, I sat back down, leaning forward until my elbows rested on my knees. I took the appraisal sheet in both hands. Another daughter. A bracelet as a breadcrumb. A trail I hadn't walked yet. A truth that had been waiting decades to be found. And beneath all the shock and betrayal and confusion, something unexpected stirred in me. Not anger, not grief, but a strange, painful hope. If she was out there, I needed to find her, before any more of Margaret's memory, or my own blood, was lost to secrecy. Before my kids made another decision for me. Before time stole one more thing I could never get back. The house felt too quiet after they left, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stayed in that silence for a long time, letting the truth settle in my bones. Another daughter, a life I never knew existed, a bracelet as the only proof she ever reached out to me. The weight of it all pressed down on my chest until I finally had to move, had to breathe somewhere that didn't smell like old memories and fresh betrayal. So I grabbed my coat, the same one with the letter Margaret once stitched into the lining, and walked out into the cold afternoon. The air had that damp, metallic smell that comes before rain. Margaret used to love that smell. She said it reminded her of new beginnings. Right now it felt more like a warning. I didn't have a plan at first. My feet just carried me to the place I always went when life got too loud, the park down near the river. I'd been walking that trail since before my kids were born. The benches were old, the pavement cracked, and the trees bent and twisted from decades of storms. But it was honest, and right now, I needed honest. I sat on a bench that overlooked the water. The river was slow today, thick with mud from last week's rainstorm. Every now and then, a gust of wind would carry the smell of wet leaves and distant chimney smoke. I closed my eyes and let it hit me. What kind of father was I, that a daughter could grow up without knowing me? What kind of man was I, that she thought she had to send a bracelet instead of knocking on my door? And what kind of children had I raised, that they hid it from me and then tore apart their mother's memory to cover their tracks? The questions came like waves, each one hitting harder than the last. After almost an hour, my phone buzzed. Emily. I ignored it. A few minutes later, another buzz, this time a text. Dad, please don't shut us out. We were scared, we messed up, but we love you. I stared at the words until they blurred. Love. A strange word to use after what they'd done. But the truth was, love is messy. It breaks, it bends, it bruises, but it also holds on longer than anger does. Margaret used to say that forgiveness wasn't a decision, it was a muscle. You had to use it or it stiffened, but I wasn't ready to use it yet. So I pocketed the phone and made a different decision. If my other daughter had reached out once, she might try again. And if she didn't, maybe I could find her. I started with the bracelet. I took the appraisal sheet to a local antique jeweler on the other side of town, a place older than I was. Wooden display cases, velvet curtains, a brass bell that sounded like a church note. The owner, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and a perfect bun, looked at the photo through her magnifying glasses. This is Georgian era, she said. Late 1700s, maybe early 1800s. Not something you find at estate sales. Something that stays in families. Could it be fake? I asked. She shook her head. Oh no. Whoever kept this kept it safe. It's not a piece someone would give up lightly. I felt the truth tug at me. She said it belonged to her mother. The woman's eyes lifted, soft and knowing. Then this was her inheritance. Her inheritance, a gift, a link to a father she never met. That bracelet suddenly felt heavier than gold. It felt like regret. The woman pointed to the delicate filigree in the photo. See that pattern? That's regional. Northern Europe. Scandinavia, maybe. Scandinavia. Not at all where I expected this story to lead. Could you tell me anything else? I asked. Not from a photo, she said. But if you find the piece, bring it to me. I'll tell you its whole history. I thanked her and walked out into the cooling air, feeling the first drops of rain peppering my coat. That's when I realized something. If the bracelet wasn't fake, then neither was the woman who sent it. And my kids. They didn't ruin everything. They just made everything harder. I had to find her myself. At home, I pulled out a dusty box from the top of my closet. Old paperwork, love letters, receipts from decades ago. I dug through it all until I found something I hadn't thought about in years. A torn page from a notebook, folded into fourths. A name, a phone number, an address. From a woman I met long before Margaret, one wild summer when I was barely more than a boy. I'd written it down thinking I might call her someday, but life swept me away instead. The name hit me like a punch. Lena. Margaret once asked me early in our marriage if there had ever been anyone I thought about before her. I told her no. I wasn't lying, not then. But the truth? That summer with Lena had been a fire. Bright, brief, and gone too quickly to understand. A month later she vanished. No explanation. And now, decades later, a daughter? I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. My hands trembled as I opened my laptop. The keys clacked loudly in the quiet room. I typed the name, the city, the year, and suddenly there she was. Obituaries, news clippings, an old yearbook photo, a life lived without me. Lena had died 6 months before Margaret. A line in her obituary caught my eye. Survived by her daughter, Hannah. Hannah, my other daughter, the bracelet's owner, the voice behind the message my children hid. I felt the room tilt. I grabbed the nightstand to steady myself. Rain hammered the windows now, loud and relentless, like the world was trying to match the storm inside me. I clicked on the next link. A fundraiser page, a message from Hannah, and one sentence that broke me clean in half. I just wish I had known my father, even once. That was it. The moment everything in me snapped into place. Anger gone. Betrayal muted. Only one truth left. I had wasted 40 years. I would not waste another day. I closed the laptop gently and whispered into the dim room, as if Margaret were standing there, listening like she always did. I'm going to find her, and I'm going to make this right, because some mistakes aren't meant to be forgiven. They're meant to be fixed. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Rain had stopped overnight, leaving the air sharp and fresh, the streets still glistening with wet asphalt. I brewed coffee, the smell of dark roast filling the kitchen, grounding me, giving me the courage I didn't yet feel in my chest. Today, I wasn't thinking about betrayal or anger. Today, I was thinking about finding Hannah, my daughter I never knew, my child kept from me by the very people who should have protected both of us. The first step was contacting a private investigator I'd used years ago, a man named Roland, quiet, methodical, with a reputation for finding people when everyone else failed. I handed him the scraps I'd found, the name, the bracelet, the yearbook photo, and the faint traces of messages my children had tried to bury. Mr. Whitaker, he said after reviewing the materials, this is tricky. She's careful. You can't just show up. But we can track her down safely and I can arrange a meeting if she's willing. Do it, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I don't care what it takes. 3 days later, Roland called. I have a location. She's been living quietly in a small town 2 hours from here. Owns a little art shop. Works with her hands. Very private. She hasn't tried to contact anyone from your family. I felt my hands go clammy. Do we approach her? Can we tell her I'm her father? We can, Roland said cautiously. But it has to be slow, gentle. She's got a right to her life and her feelings. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Gentle. That word hovered in the air like a lesson I had yet to learn. When I finally drove to her town, the streets smelled of fresh bread and rain-washed cobblestones. The art shop was small but charming, with hand-painted signs and a display of ceramics in the window. I parked down the street, heart hammering. My entire life had led to this one moment. Years of love, betrayal, grief, and secrecy, all culminating here. Roland and I entered the shop slowly. The bell over the door jingled lightly. She was behind the counter, cleaning brushes, hair tucked into a messy bun, completely unaware of the man who had carried half of her story for decades. I swallowed and approached. Excuse me, I said, my voice low, careful. Are you Hannah? She looked up, startled, eyes wide. Not suspicious, not angry, just surprised. Her face mirrored mine in some ways. The same nose, the same deep-set eyes. Margaret's eyes. Yes, she said cautiously. Can I help you? I'm your father, I said. Words I never imagined I'd speak out loud. My voice cracked under the weight of it, but I kept going. I'm David Whitaker. I'm the father you never knew. She froze. The brushes in her hands slipped. I could see her heart racing in her chest, the hesitation, the confusion. I didn't speak again. I let the silence do the work, the pause giving her the space to process what I had just confessed. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds, it was impossible to measure. Then she spoke, quiet, trembling. You're really my father? I am, I said slowly. And I've carried the truth too long. Your mother, Lena, she passed away before I had a chance to be there, and I never wanted to miss you. Tears welled in her eyes, but not the tears of a child abandoned. These were adult tears, cautious, skeptical, aware of life's betrayals. She took a step back, processing, but she didn't run. That was enough for now. We spent the next hour talking, not all at once, but in fragments. Stories of her life, stories of mine, carefully bridging the decades. I apologized for the time lost, for the secrecy, for the betrayals. And she listened, finally allowing a small smile to appear, fleeting, like the first light of dawn. By the time I left her shop, I felt something I hadn't in years, a fragile sense of connection. Not perfect, not healed, but real, tangible, something that could grow, slowly, if nurtured with honesty. Driving home, the memories of Margaret's jewelry, the betrayal, the hidden bracelet, the appraisal that exposed the truth swirled in my mind. My children had acted out of fear, misguided love, or selfishness, but the truth had a way of finding its path eventually, and now it had found mine. Back at home, the house felt alive again, not because it had changed, but because I had. The weight of secrecy and lies had lifted, replaced with a sense of purpose, a new chapter to write. I could finally see past the pain of betrayal to the possibility of reconciliation. Perhaps someday, my children and I would talk openly about their mistakes. But for now, the most important thing had been done. Hannah knew me. I knew her. And the bridge between us, however delicate, was finally built. I brewed another cup of coffee, the aroma stronger this time, richer, as if signaling the start of something new. I sat by the window and watched the oak tree outside, rain-soaked and resilient, bending but not breaking. A symbol, perhaps, of what family can endure when the truth comes to light. And as I sat there sipping the coffee, I realized the lesson that had been waiting for me all these years. Family isn't just blood or history. It's honesty. It's facing the hard truths. It's protecting the memories of those we love. And sometimes, it's having the courage to find the ones we never knew we lost. If this story resonated with you, about lost family, betrayal, and uncovering hidden truths, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We share real, emotional family justice stories every week that will grip your heart and leave you reflecting on the meaning of trust and love. And if you're ready for another shocking story, check out My Brother Stole My Father's War Medals, but one secret letter revealed everything he tried to hide. The truth behind family secrets is never what you expect, and sometimes it can change everything. Stay tuned. Grandpa Harry will guide you through it.